Hello, I'm Steven and I like to make cardboard costumes and props. Today I'm going to make the Flash ring that the Flash wears in The Flash. Let's get started. Off camera I made a template and you can get it for free via the link that I have in the description. I printed the template out and then worked my way from the top to the bottom. FYI, the template that you'll get is a little bit different than the one that I have here just because I changed it to make it a little bit easier. But the first piece that I cut out on either template is the actual ring. I taped the template onto cereal box cardboard, making sure the cardboard curves easily in the same direction as the length of the rectangle that makes up the ring. For the template that you guys get, I ended up making this piece just a regular rectangle instead of this angular hourglass shape that I did in the video. It looks nicer as a rectangle, and I ended up snipping off those angly bits at the end of my build anyway, so yeah. Anyway, I took this rectangle and I wrapped it around my index finger and I added tape to the ends so it forms a ring. Then I took it off my finger and then I added tape to the inside of the ring just so it can be securely closed. Once the ring was a ring, I cut out the two thin rectangles at the top of the template and then moved on to the itty bitty design. For this itty bitty design, you just want the circle and the lightning bolt. Feel free to use a hole punch if you do not want to carefully cut out the tiny circle. However, you can do it with scissors. As for the lightning bolt, you will need to use a utility knife. Be careful and gentle and slowly cut it out. When both are cut out, use super glue or white glue to immediately glue the lightning bolt onto the center of the tiny circle. If you're following along, I recommend gluing them right away just because it's so tiny that you can easily mistake it for offcuts or garbage, recycling or whatever, and you don't want to throw it away. As for the other pieces of the template, I continued to tape them onto cereal box cardboard and then cut them out with either scissors or a utility knife, making sure to keep all of the pieces organized so I didn't mix anything up. For the dial is just the big circle and then the lightning bolt. It's the main part of the design that you see when you look at the ring. When I was making it, I decided that it looked a little flat, so I added a third piece to it. This is just a thinner ring that got stacked on top of the thicker ring, and then the lightning bolt on top of that. In my mind, it just helped make it look a little bit fancier, but if you don't want to use the thinner ring, then you don't have to. But I glued the base circle, then the ring, the thinner ring, and then stacked the lightning bolt on top. I started with super glue, but then I quickly realized that white glue was the much better choice here. White glue obviously takes a lot longer to dry, but I like the fact that I can move and nudge the pieces of the template together when the glue is still wet. I let that dry completely, and then I took my utility blade and lightly cut a zigzag line into the center of it. This dial is going to be split into two halves along this zigzag center line. But before I cut it all the way through, I covered everything in another layer of white glue. All this extra glue just guaranteed that none of these layers are going to pop off when I'm pushing down with my utility knife to cut all the way through. So once that layer of extra glue dried, it was time to carefully cut the dial in half. All it took was a sharp knife, some patience, and a couple minutes until I got two halves of the dial. It's beautiful, right? However, as is, this dial is a little flat, and it needed to be a little bit more substantial. That's what the next four pieces on the template are meant to do, to bulk it up and make it look a little thicker. For this piece, I gently curved it, took a thin piece of tape, and taped the two ends of the edge onto the half of the dial. The tape holds this thin curved piece onto the dial, so I can grab my hot glue gun, add a thin layer of hot glue to the inside of it, which will then keep it from moving. I repeated the same thing for the other side, waited until the hot glue dried, and then cut off the bits of tape that were poking out. You can't even tell that there was tape there to begin with. The dial is not complete until there's one more decorative piece added to it. It's just a thin rectangle of cereal box cardboard that gets glued on with white glue right around the circumference of the circle. And this is actually what makes it look like a dial. If you look at a watch, it's kind of like the same thing. It looks like a dial. The reason why these rectangles are longer than they have to be is because it's much easier to just cut off the excess than to measure everything perfectly and then glue it perfectly into place. So yeah, once it's dry, I just took some scissors, snipped off the overhang of the rectangles, and checked to make sure that the two halves of the dial still fit together. And once it fits together, that's the dial. Okay, so it's time to assemble this sucker. Moving back to the ring, I removed the tape on top, slipped the ring onto my finger, and used white glue to glue the itty bitty lightning bolt and circle smack dab into the center of the ring. I let that dry completely before gluing thin strips of cardboard along either edge of the center of the ring. So just on either edge of the itty bitty design. These are just small detail pieces that get painted silver later, and it's just to give the illusion that there is a hidden compartment underneath the ring. Once the white glue dries, I attached on the sliding function. It just involved looping a piece of cardboard around the ring and gluing the ends of it onto itself while simultaneously avoiding getting any glue on the actual ring itself. I use super glue here, but you can just as easily use more white glue. That's all there is to it. However, you just want to avoid getting any glue on the ring. The glue should only be on the rectangle that is the slider. Okay, so for the final assembly, I attached the dial to the ring. In order to do this, I took the two halves of the dial, pushed them together, and added a piece of tape on top of them so that they would stay together. I then pushed the sliding mechanisms all the way to the top of the ring so they're hidden once the dial is placed on top of them. I was happy with the placement. I couldn't see the little sliding mechanisms underneath the dial, so I removed the dial, added a nice little bit of hot glue to the sliders, and gently smushed the dial on top of them. If you're following along, you want to be gentle so you don't get any hot glue on the actual ring. The glue should only be on the sliders and then on the underside of the dial. I held that in place, waited until the glue dried, and then checked to make sure that it was still able to slide back and forth. It was able to slide, so I moved on to the paint job. The center of the ring on either side of the itty bitty design was painted in red craft paint. As for the itty bitty design itself, the circle was painted white, and then the itty bitty lightning bolt on top of that circle was painted yellow. The raised up edges on either side of this itty bitty design were painted in black, and then in silver. When all that dried, the rest of the ring and the dial were painted black, and then in several layers of light gold. As for the center of the dial, that was painted in silver mixed with a little black, but my camera died and I didn't notice it, so I do not have that footage, but you'll see what that color looks like in the glamour shots, which are actually happening right now. So there you have it, the Flash ring made out of cardboard. It fits great, and I love the pop of red when it opens up to reveal the illusion of Flash's costume. I really love it, and I hope you guys do too. I was originally going to make Flash's helmet, or his cowl, or whatever you want to call it, but I really hate the design in this upcoming movie. But anyway, feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye-bye.